Welcome to the first flagship smartphone of 2025. Welcome back to the channel, guys. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, but you've been watching this channel for quite a while, just give it a little click wherever it is. If you haven't watched this channel ever before, then I need to earn that click. I get that. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll fancy clicking it. This is the OnePlus 13. It's the first device I'm reviewing in 2025, and it has a 5th generation Hasselblad camera system. It's running Oxygen OS 15, which promises to be lightweight and intuitive. And they're also promising cutting edge performance, a record breaking display, and exceptional battery life. Now, in 2024, I promised myself and you guys that I would review phones differently this year because they're all really good, particularly if you look at Android phones. They all have fantastic performance, fantastic displays, amazing battery life, and most takes on Android 15. When you get the manufacturers doing their own thing with Android 15, this might rock the boat a little bit. You may not agree with this. They all feel very similar, and by that I mean very good. So what I'm doing now is focusing on the one thing mainly which the manufacturer thinks sets their device apart from the rest, and the review guide for the OnePlus 13 starts with the camera system. Before I get started, just a very quick plug for my newsletter. This is completely free, it goes out every week, and it's a behind the scenes glimpse at this channel. Also, I give you the content I found that week that you might find interesting, and in the future, we'll be doing giveaways and product recommendations as well. There's loads of stuff we've got planned with this. It's completely free, you can unsubscribe at any time. The link is down below. Let's run through the specs of the OnePlus 13 very quickly. So it's got the brand new Snapdragon 8 Elite chip inside, and there's two options, one with 256 gig of storage and 12 gigabytes of RAM, and another one with 512 gig of storage and 16 gig of RAM. It's running Oxygen OS 15, which is based on Android 15, and it has a 6.8-inch Pro XDR display with 4,500 nits of peak brightness and the obligatory 120 Hz refresh rate. There's a 6,000 mAh battery, which promises 4 years of use until it hits 80% capacity. That's compatible with 100 watt Super VOOC charging and 50 watt Air VOOC wireless charging, and OnePlus has released a brand new fan equipped magnetic charging puck for the latter. You do need a compatible case for that, but it's pretty cool because it's got a fan inside. There's Wi-Fi 7, Bluetooth 5.4, and IP68 and IP69 water resistance. I'll get onto that later. In terms of the pricing, I've had this so early that I don't have that to hand at the time of filming. The prices have just come in while I'm in Las Vegas for CES, and they are $899 for the 256 gig model and $999 for the 512 gig model. And yes, they're both UK prices. Not bad. Okay, the camera system is a 3-camera setup, wide, ultra-wide, and telephoto with a 3x optical zoom. They're all 50 megapixel, they all have optical image stabilization, as does the selfie cam, which is a 32 megapixel camera. It shoots up to 8K video at 30 frames per second and Dolby Vision at 4K 60 frames per second. In terms of the camera system, let's go through the different features that OnePlus has built into it because they impact the way it takes photos and the types of photos you can achieve with it. So firstly, we have a tri-prism telephoto lens, which basically enables a longer focal length in a smaller body by reflecting light 3 times. I don't know what any of that means, but in reality, it means you get a much smaller camera bump. It's not bad at all. If we compare that to the Vivo X200 Pro, which has a very pronounced and heavy camera bump, this is lightweight by comparison. And we still get 3x, and 3x on this phone is great. 6x isn't bad as well. You start to get into the digital realm with that. If you go into 10x zone and 30 and beyond, it does start to get a little bit processed. But then I've had this with every camera system recently. It does rely on AI to fill in the gaps, and unless you've got absolutely perfect conditions, it will look a bit processed. That said, I don't know how many people are going that far with their zooming with their camera on their phone, but again, 9 times out of 10 it worked fine. And my litmus test for this is my son. He does not stand still, so if I can get a decent 3x photo of him, that's fine, and it does that job perfectly. There's also dual exposure, where you have a long exposure and a short exposure taken at the same time. It does that automatically. It's not a feature, you just press the button and that happens behind the scenes. The idea is that it creates the sharpest image from those 2 images, and it seems to work. More often than not, I got the right photo out of this phone. We then have clear burst, which is when you press and hold the shutter button button and it fires off loads of frames for you. Obviously that's for fast moving objects. We tried this in Amsterdam during the press conference for this phone in November. There were two scenarios. One of them was a bike where the wheel was turning very quickly and the never settle OnePlus their motto, etc., was on the wheel basically. And as you can see, I managed to capture some pretty sharp images of that with a bit of movement as well. There's still a little bit of motion in there, which is quite nice. The same thing with these photos of this breakdancer. He was moving very quickly, but again, that clear burst enabled me to get that photo nice and sharp. The only downside with this is that if you back up your photos to Google Photos, those clear burst frames go up as separate images. So you can end up with loads of photos in your Google Photos library. In the Photos app on the OnePlus 13, they are grouped together at least, but just bear that in mind. Then we have the Hasselblad portraits. Now that is where the H comes in here. That's Hasselblad's logo, obviously. And you get a 1x, a 2x, and a 3x, and they replicate Hasselblad lenses. The results are lovely. This takes some of the best portrait images I've ever seen on a smartphone. Again, this is becoming quite common, but the Hasselblad camera system in the OnePlus 13 is the 5th generation. So these guys have had a lot of experience doing this. And again, using my son as the test subject here, he doesn't get paid for this. He's going to start asking for money, I know, but let me know what you think in the comments. But I think these are lovely portraits. We then have smart modes where the phone recognizes the scene. So for instance, if you're at a concert or, as I was here, a pantomime over the Christmas period, it sets the ISO basically to best suit that scene. And generally speaking, it works pretty well. In terms of night photography, I took this on a festive light trail walk and it's done a very good job of capturing the atmosphere of that evening. I even managed to get a nice family selfie with a front-facing camera in very challenging conditions. It was freezing cold. The light was, well, there are lights there, obviously, because it's a light trail, but the ambient light was very low. And there were some hits and misses in terms of how sharp some of the images were, but generally speaking, again, 9 times out of 10, it absolutely nailed it. So overall, I think this produces sharp, reliable and very atmospheric images. They may not be to your taste, but as I always say, this is the most subjective part of any smartphone review. Let me know what you think about these photos in the comments. In terms of video, it does a good job. The iPhone, I think, is still the best video shooter in the land of smartphones, and you do get this kind of jittery stabilization thing occasionally happening on the OnePlus 13, but apart from that, it does a good job. It's completely usable, and I wouldn't hesitate to use this to shoot some content for this channel. So camera system, very good. The design of the OnePlus 13 I think is very nice. This is the Midnight Ocean version. There's also Arctic Dawn and Black Eclipse. It also has industry first microfiber vegan leather on the back of it. I'm not sure what that means, but it does mean in reality that it's not too slippery, which is quite nice. The camera bump, as I mentioned, is very small, which is good. The buttons all feel very nice. It's got this triple slider thing here for ring, vibrate and silent. There's no camera button because you don't need one. It's a lovely looking phone and it's quite a big upgrade on the OnePlus 12 because that didn't have IP68 water resistance. This does, but it also has IP69 water resistance, which is basically protection against high pressure jets of water, which means nothing to most people, but it's nice to know it's there. The under-display fingerprint reader is very fast and very reliable, and on the subject of the display itself, it's lovely. 4,500 nits of peak brightness, so it's very, very capable in direct sunlight. The bezels are barely noticeable, as you can see there. It's lovely, as it should be. It's broken 21 display records as well. It's also the first phone at the time of filming to gain DisplayMate A++ recognition, whatever that is, and it has LTPO 4.1, which means technically it can run 2 different refresh rates at the same time. I don't understand that at all. Admittedly, look into it if you need to, but apparently it improves battery life, which is good news. It also has next-gen eye care with 2160Hz PWM dimming and AquaTouch, which is intended to make the phone more usable when the display is wet. We tried this at the press conference in Amsterdam and it worked pretty well. There's also glove mode, which is a brilliant name, and as the name suggests, means that you can in theory use normal gloves on this display. It seems to work, so that's good, and that's it. Oh, the only other thing, I know this bothers people, it does not bother me at all. It's a slightly curved display, but only slightly. So if you've got a real problem with curved displays, don't let it put you off because it is so minor and it doesn't matter. Performance. Now this is running the Snapdragon 8 Elite chip, which is the brand new flagship chip from Snapdragon, obviously, and I thought, let's run a Geekbench test on it. I don't normally do benchmarks of any kind. If you've just found this channel, I'm not interested in benchmarks, but because this is the new Snapdragon, I thought let's give it a chance and see what it can do. So I ran Geekbench and it scored 3063 in single core and 9295 in multi-core. Now if we compare that with the S24 Ultra, which has the previous generation Snapdragon, that did 2172 in single core and 6782 in multi-core. So on paper, significantly better. Against the iPhone 16 Pro Max, that did 3,421 in single core and 8,449 in multi-core. So in theory, the iPhone 16 Pro Max is better in single core compared to this, but this smashes it pretty much, kind of, in terms of multi-core. Now, those numbers mean absolutely nothing to me. They may mean nothing to you. They mean nothing in everyday life because this feels just like this, and it feels just like the S24 Ultra as well. Then we have Oxygen OS 15, and I know this will rock the boat because people get very tribal about their favorite version of Android, but I don't have an affinity to any of them, which is good news from a reviewing standpoint, obviously. It feels just as good as any of the other Android 15 based operating systems I've used. It's customized just enough to look a little bit different and a little bit more OnePlus like, but it's great. In fact, let me know in the comments, what do you want me to, in future smartphone reviews of Android phones, what do you want me to cover on the operating system? Because for me, Oxygen OS 15 is great. The battery life is stellar. It's incredibly good. You'll get 2 days out of it, no problem at all. And again, just like every other Android phone I've tested in the last 12 months, if you leave this on standby, it lasts for days and days. It's almost comical how much battery life you can get out of this thing when it's not doing anything, unlike the iPhone. We then have OnePlus AI this time around, and it's got all the stuff in there that you'd expect. So we have the photo editing AI things like detail boost, where you can take a cropped image and restore some of the detail. That worked pretty well during my testing. Unblur, which does, as it says on the tin really, take a blurred photo and it will attempt to restore the detail. Reflection remover, again, works very well, works just as well as the reflection remover in Galaxy AI. And then we have the usual assistance with writing. So, writing tone, summarizing stuff, formatting, etc. Again, it all worked fine. Circle to search is on this phone as well, as is Gemini. That is the default assistant on the OnePlus 13. And now it's time for my inevitable conclusion about the OnePlus 13. The OnePlus 13 offers some very big upgrades over the OnePlus 12, including the water resistance, the camera system, and the inclusion of all those AI things that I just mentioned. In terms of the camera system overall, I think it's very good. It's not as good as the Vivo X200 Pro, but nothing is. If you're not up for Oppo, if you're not up for Vivo, if you don't want a Samsung device, and if you hate the thought of having an iPhone, this is a very good way to start the year. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you've still got some time and you want to check out that Vivo X200 Pro, keep watching for a link to my review.